Good morning, FOR 242. Welcome to week number 5. We are looking again at the standard UMFK forestry stand type map. As a forester, this is the type of map you would expect to provide to a client, and as a woodlot owner, this is the kind of map you would expect to receive from your forester. It shows where the property is, what the magnetic declination is. We have a UTM grid around the edges. We have a legend showing what these green hash marks mean. We indicate the rivers are here and label one Connors Brook in blue italics by convention. And we have a key to this forest inventory coding system. So this would be S, softwood, 2, pole timber, 4 to 10 inches diameter, B, well stocked. The understocked condition would be less than full utilization of the growing space, so there's big gaps in the canopy that aren't filled by the dominant cohort. There may be seedlings coming up in those gaps, but you're not using the full growing space with the main canopy, which in some situations is exactly what you want, so C is not necessarily bad. A, or overstocked, is so dense that the trees are essentially killing each other through competition. Expect individual trees to become weak and more susceptible to disease because of that intensity of competition. So B is most of the time where you want to be, unless you're doing something like an irregular shelterwood where you want to have seedlings coming up under the main cohort, in which case C is your objective. But usually if you're in A or approaching A, you want to get back to B. But sometimes if you've been in A for a very long time, the trees have become so weak and so dependent on the stability of their neighbors that if you attempt any kind of a thinning, they just blow over. There are ways around that. The Fimmelschlag, expanding irregular group shelterwood with reserves, is designed for correcting that situation where it's been overstocked for a very long time. Or harvest and start over. In any case, this map goes with a management plan. It is central to that plan, in fact. It's everything from how you conduct the inventory as a forester, to how you communicate that to the landowner, and how you work out plans for what you're going to do when. These classifications don't come from just air photo interpretation alone. They come from ground-based inventory, forest mensuration, and also from LiDAR. More on LiDAR later in the class, but for now, imagine a conversation between forester and landowner. Your goal is to explain to the landowner, to the point where they understand it, what is going on in each one of these stands. You then discuss options with them for what to do in each one of them, and write that down in the management plan. S2B, currently planted spruce, currently has good growing space, currently in a well-stocked condition. Needs to be thinned again before it reached an overstocked condition. Plan thinning in 2026. M3A, mixed wood, saw timber, overstocked. Riparian. Riparian meaning stream side. That means specific regulations within 75 feet of this stream bank. You have road access here and here, so you could potentially get into this area. It looks like some work has been done here, and that wasn't blocked out in the stand typing. And just because we've defined this as a stand doesn't mean you have to do the same thing everywhere. You could very easily draw a new boundary and say we're going to do one thing here and another thing here, or nothing at all. But you can see how this map would help in that conversation. Say, I think we could do a shelterwood operation here, and then let's do a single tree selection down here, removing, say, 30%. Shelterwood being the even-aged regeneration, so you're giving enough light for the species you want, but not enough light for the species you don't want. Maybe there's some white pine you'd like to encourage, but not encourage the aspen in the process. Where a single tree selection combines both stand tending, thinning, and regeneration in small groups of very shade-tolerant species. That'll be your red spruce and the balsam fir with it, and your sugar maple and probably the red maple with it. This and this are of course clear cuts. And if memory serves, they have been planted, so there's tending, monitoring, things that go with that. So this all informs the plan. You'll do this year, this that year, this the other year, this in 10 years, this in 2 years, this in 5 years. All of these things have a stand number and a plan associated with them. Today we're going to play the perspective of the forester who's just blocked out the stands, or done the stand delineation that you just did last week. We're going to make this map and lay it out for inventory. Meaning that we're going to generate points that you would navigate to in the field using this in the Avenza Maps app or in your GPS. For my foresters, this would be all in a day's work. For the rest of you, who I anticipate to be future landowners, this is what you would be asking of your forester. So all of you have from last week this lines feature, this lines KMZ, and this will become your polygons, or your stand boundaries. We're going to start where we stopped last week, which is with an air photo in QGIS. If your stand boundaries are in a different county from where you have air photos, then you need to find the air photo for that county. If you're having trouble, or if you need to clip down to a small size for just your area, please let me know and I will clip that out for you. So don't spend any time getting hung up on this step. If it's not working, let me know. We'll get it squared away. So starting from the air photo, I happen to have the main township boundaries in there as well, but that's not important at the moment. Let's go ahead, and I've got that in my FOR 242 datasets, week number 5. And that KMZ, you want the one that looks like a little blob, not the one that looks like a little checkerboard. Double click. And now you can right click and zoom to layer all the way at the top. There it is. Now that's not showing up very well at all. So let's double click here. So you see if I just double click on that line, it opens up layer properties and defaults to the Symbology tab. Symbology is the color used to display the feature. So let's go ahead and make that yellow. So see this little triangle here? I can just pick yellow from down here or pick from standard colors. But if I click there on that ring of color, that points the triangle there. And I can click, hold, and drag this around. So all the way to black there, all the way to white there, all the way to the most saturated yellow there. Let's hit apply there, and you can see that all right, but I want that to be a touch thicker. I adjust thickness here, so you see I'm just using these up and down arrows. Apply, so that shows up pretty well. You see this is very far from perfect, but it's good enough to be getting on with. If you're providing this to a client, you would absolutely clean these lines up. But let's go ahead and work with this, and we need to use the tool called Polygonize. So Polygonize. You can access that through the processing toolbox. If you don't have that, under View, Panels, Processing Toolbox. So here under the processing toolbox we have search. I'm going to search for Polygonize. Polygonize, not really a real word, so you can say it however you want to. But double click on that to open the tool up. Input layer is Thompson stands in my case, it'll be your stands for you. And I'm going to just say create a temporary layer, because if I don't turn out to like it, if something's wrong, if I have to go back and redo some of my lines, I don't want to create 100 files and have to then sort through them. So I'm going to just create a temporary layer, and then I'll show you how to save it later if I like it. So run, close, done. So you see what this has done, and let's adjust this color so you can see. If I double click on that again, I can go here. If I want to change how all of this displays, it defaults to this, and then you have to click on that to really change everything. So always remember to click on Simple Fill. So Fill Color, I'm going to just slide this opacity all the way down, which makes it transparent, so it just goes away. And then, well, I can also just hit no brush for the fill color. That does the same thing. But there is that. And let's go ahead and just make that a bright red. And okay, there we go. And this is showing well enough because the yellow line is just a little thicker. But let's go ahead and make the width of the yellow lines quite a lot thicker. And then we can see what's going on here. So the red lines are our polygon boundaries. And the yellow lines are the lines that you created in Google Earth. Now every one of these has gone from just a bunch of squiggly lines to being actually enclosed polygons. So I click on any one of those and it gives me the information about it, which is right now no information at all. We'll get to that. And every time I click that, it opens up a new window, so I just have to close all those. But you see how this is now an enclosed feature with area, instead of just a series of lines that have length, but no width and no area. If I want to see everything, I can right-click and zoom to layer, and there's all of it. And we can already see that since the time the air photo in Google Earth was taken, and 2018, when this air photo was taken, there's changes. So there's been work done in here, and that's left a buffer along the stream there, treated differently, left that looking untouched. This area looks like it's been thinned out, and let's see, what else do we have changed here? So changes, changes, changes. These two more or less unchanged. That boundary would now want to be changed out to there. That's stuff for another time. About the buffer distance, you can use your measuring tool here. use the measuring distance in feet, and this ought to be a 250-foot buffer. And let's see, 264 feet. So they've given it just a little touch extra for safety, as you definitely want to do. Don't mess that up, especially with a big river like that. You've got to get that right. And they did, so that's good. So within that 250-foot buffer, different jurisdictions have different rules, but it's usually either 40% maximum removal over a certain period of time, normally 10 years, or have to leave at least 60 square feet of basal area, or if there's some very good reason, you can get a waiver to get around that. One waiver I saw one time was on a glacial esker where it was very gravelly, sandy soil. Red pine was growing there. Red pine does very well in open conditions. So this was a public lands forester on BPL ground, Bureau of Parks and Lands ground. And he made the decision as the forester for that district that would be better off as a clear cut. So he actually clear cut right up to a stream, went beautiful. The generation of red pine came right up, everybody's happy. Those are not regulations to take lightly. In any case, we'd have to adjust that, fix that little oopsies there, and probably draw a new line there. But for right now, let's go ahead and accept this. So that polygon layer looks good. I'm going to right-click, export, save feature as. That makes it a permanent layer. And I'm going to go ahead and save that, not in GIS 300, but in FOR 242, week 5. Thompson stands polygons.shp. If it's not .shp here, well, that's all it's letting you do, so there you go. But you would select from that drop-down menu. Okay, save. And that's because you told it to be in the Esri shapefile format. And the CRS, Coordinate Reference System, want that to be in NAD 83 UTM Zone 19 North. Okay. And there it is. Now we want to remove that one. We don't need it anymore, so right-click, remove layer. Okay. And we don't need the old lines anymore, so right-click, remove layer. Okay. And now let's go ahead and make that. Double-click, simple fill. Instead of that, no brush for the interior, so it's the same as making that transparent. And let's go ahead and make that yellow because I really like yellow for stand boundaries. Okay. And I don't love that thickness, so double click and simple fill, and let's make that 0.66. Okay, there we go, now you can see. And you see I've finished all my stand typing in here. This would have to be redone, and that would have to be redone on the basis of the current inventory, not as it was before, but as it is now. And this is all that I got done, I'll be honest with you guys, during a Zoom call. And there's lots of meetings where I don't have a speaking role, and I just get to listen, so there we are. And here, I didn't get to that, so we're just gonna call that a reserve area. Sometimes landowners like a reserve area. Is it different forest type? Yes, but a stand is a unit of trees, homogeneous enough to treat as a unit. We're going to call this whole thing reserve, and if we don't need to know what each different type is, if we're not doing anything with it, then it's homogeneous enough to treat as a unit, when the treatment is leave it alone. Now, the first thing we want to do with this is get our property boundary, or the boundaries of our working area. And to do that, we use the tool Dissolve. And you'll see what that does as we do it. Vector, Geoprocessing Tools, Dissolve. Input layer is your stands, and we're going to create a temporary layer to make sure we like it first. Run. Close. Now all the internal lines have gone away and we have just an outer boundary. We'll change that to an extra thick yellow line like we had in the example, and I keep doing this, there's an easier way. Make that no brush, but there's our yellow. We can select from recent colors here. I'm going to make that 1.06, and now we have the outer boundary line. Let's make the inner boundaries just a touch thinner, and that will make the contrast better. So now we have stand boundaries and property or working area boundaries. So the boundary is good, and I want to use that boundary to get the soils data from the USDA Web Soil Service for this area exactly. I don't want to know anything outside of that. I want the soils for my property. The way we're going to do that is first save our dissolved polygon, right-click, export, save feature as, and we're going to save that as an Esri shapefile in week number 5, and we're going to call that propertybounds.shp. Enter save. Yes, add save file to the map, and yes, confirm NAD 83, UTM zone 19 north. OK. And as before, remove the temporary layer. OK, and now I'm going to symbolize property bounds just like we did before. And again, I keep doing this, but that's OK. And there's that, or I can pick from my recent colors, make that thick, and OK, there it is again. To get the web soil survey data for this polygon itself and nothing else, I need to go to where I saved the polygon, and that's going to be in my week number 5 folder here. And that's property bounds there. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and that selects all of those. If there's something I want to deselect, I can hold down my control key and deselect. If I want to reselect them, still holding the control key, selects all of those. Now I need to zip this or put it into one compressed folder. So all 5 of these make up the shapefile. There's the actual shape itself, there's the database file, .gbf. The rest of these are telling it how to project the map, that's the UTM zone 19 north, etc., and how all these layers should speak to each other. So if you have to move this, you have to move all 5, or sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's more. But for now, with those selected, right-click, send to compressed zipped folder. And now you have one zipped folder that if you go into it, it contains all of these, but you can't use them. It's all compressed, zipped up, stuffed in the suitcase. Now, we need to get to our web soil survey. Type in web soil survey home, and start WSS, big green button. Now, the last time we used this, we just zoomed in using the box. That's perfectly fine, but that's not what we're doing today. So today we want to import AOI and import AOI from zipped shapefile. So we're going to set the AOI after we choose the file. So step 1, choose the file, then hit the button to set AOI. Got to go in that order. So that is going to take us to week 5, FOR 242. And we have to select our property bounds. So navigate to wherever you saved that compressed folder and hit OK. And then hit Set AOI. It unzips that, it looks for it, it finds it, there it is. Now we can just look right at our soils map, and this gives you the percentage of the property itself that is each one of these soil types. You can look at these and say AMB, Allagash Madawaska Association, click on it here, load up the description. This is, let's see, silt loam, silt loam, silt loam. Farmland of statewide importance, of course it's not farmed at the moment, but this soil type could be farmed. Stream terraces, coarse loamy glaciofluvial deposits, so glacial stream, glaciofluvial, glacial stream. It is well drained, more than 80 inches to a restrictive feature, meaning bedrock or water table. Depth of water table, more than 80 inches. Let's see, what else do we have? Moderately decomposed plant material on top, then fine sandy loam, then fine sandy loam, then fine sand. If you wanted to grow pine, that could be a spot to do it. And I think I might actually see some pine here. Let's zoom in and take a look. Yeah, I think we've got some pine in there. Good spot for it. In any case, let's go ahead and go back to our previous view. There we are. We're not actually wanting to explore this today, though you can. We want to download soils data. You have to ask nicely, create download link here. It'll think for a moment, and then you have a download link that will appear here. Once this appears, go ahead and click on it. It will download and appear in your downloads folder. So let's go ahead and access that. Here's my downloads folder, and there's my zipped folder for the web soil service AOI. Go ahead and double click that, and you can look and see what's in here, but you can't do anything with it until you extract all. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to browse to my week 5. This is my working folder. I've already done this, but I would select folder. Clicking that would cause that to extract to that location. And here we are in that location. So WSS AOI 2021, today's date and time. Go ahead and double click and go to spatial. We have the A, L, and P, area, lines, points. So this one, the .shp, 99 kilobytes, the biggest one here. biggest one always, if you're doing it this way. This is the one you want to drag and drop into QGIS. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've got Q there. I've got my spatial layer here. Click, hold, drag, release, copy that in there. And now I have my soils boundaries. Let's go ahead and double click on that and change our simple fill from solid to no brush and our stroke color to a bright red. There we go. Make that a touch thicker so you can see it. Okay, and there we are. And let's say we want to have the labels on here. Of course we do. Right click, Properties, and then under Symbology there's the Labels tab. And instead of no labels, we want single labels. And we want that to be Mu Sim. Apply. And now you can see there, that's where it is. And we have some options on how to make that look. We can say, put a mask, a buffer. Let's see what happens when we draw a text buffer. Apply. So now that stands out against the air photo. That default is actually pretty good, so let's go ahead and keep that. But let's see what else. What else do we want to change? Our text, if we go here, that's a bit big. Let's go ahead and move that down. And there we go, that's a touch better. And we can also change the opacity of the text, which is kind of nice sometimes. Sometimes you want the information to be there when you look at it, but not really stand out. And if we really want to do that, I'd also go to the buffer and set that to about 50% too. Apply. Now that's a bit much, so let's try 60. Oh, let's see, 72. 72, 82. 82 looks pretty good. So you see how it's not hitting you in the face when you look at it. Let's turn off our stands now. So it's there when you look for it, but it's not really jumping out and hitting you in the face when you first look at this map. It's not the main subject of the map. So now we have all of these soil type boundaries, and you see some of this sort of correlates to how the forest is laid out. But most of this forest stand typing we've done is more influenced by history than soil type, where soil type would have been drastically more important historically. But since this has been done here, you've got to have a line here. Doesn't matter if it's the same soil type, it's a different forest type now. So the soil type is very good to know for sort of a planning purpose. If I say I didn't really like that this was a fragmented landscape, say that I wanted to turn this into one thing. Just because this is different from this is different from this doesn't mean I can't sort of point it all in the same direction. This area here has been thinned out and is in a probably understocked condition, so this is going to be regenerating, so that's probably a shelter wood. It's almost definitely on purpose. Where this one is a still pretty dense, well-stocked to maybe overstocked condition. Now an option would be to treat this differently from this, or you could seek to take this and make it feel or act more like this. You could do a shelter wood in here as well, and let those two things sort of catch up together, and then instead of having this as one thing and that as the other thing, you could have that entire soil type be one thing. Of course, we're still working on the glue to put the trees back, so you can't really go the other way and make this look like that. In any case, I, as a landowner, would expect a soils type map, and as a forester, you would provide that, along with the information in an appendix of what each one of these codes means, so you can look and see, oh, we have type TRB quite a lot in here, and some other places there. So what is TRB? You should be able to flip to the back of your management plan and find information like this, which you can access for TRB, and have all of that information here. So this is what type TRB is, Telos, Menard, Monson Association. You have a printable version here, and we'll just go ahead and view that. For every one of those, you can get a description like this. You can include that in the appendix, and then your landowner can flip back and say, all right, well, I have this nice map with these codes. What does it mean? For inclusion in the main body of the management plan, you would use the printable version button here, and you can just give it a custom subtitle here, prepared for landowner. That works. View. That will load up, and when it does, it will take you to a new tab, and that is a downloadable PDF that you can just slide right into the management plan. It's got a north arrow, it's got a map scale. If printed on 8.5 by 11, it will be 1 to 40,000, meaning 1 inch on the ground is 40,000 inches on the actual surface of the earth. Credit, of course, goes to the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, you should remember that name. and it tells you which coordinate system it's in. The edge ticks, of course you want those. There was a box to check and it's on by default. And then as you scroll down, you've got a key to all the symbols you might see here. So we have here, here, and here that symbol for wet spots, so you'd want to be aware of that if you were doing any kind of mechanized operation, because you definitely don't want to sink a machine in that. And down here we have the map unit legend, which tells you what each one of these is. You can search any of those and it will tell you some information about those soils. So for one part of your assignment, just go ahead and hit the download button and job done. But sometimes you do want the same data on your map itself, and it can be handy to save that way. So let's just uncheck that for now. We don't need it for what we're doing in the next part here. What we want right now is to know, is it hardwood, softwood, or mixed wood? And that means we have to go into the attribute table, which is the spreadsheet associated with the shapefile, and we're going to do that through our stands polygons. Right-click, open attribute table. And now we want to add a new field, and you see that option is there, but it's grayed out. We have to be editing first. To get into the editing, right-click, toggle editing. That turns editing on. You see that little pencil there? That means editing. And now I can open up my attribute table and go ahead and click on new field. I'm going to name this composition. And it's going to not allow me to type an N because there's a limit to the number of characters there, so compositio. And that has got to be a type text. And I'm going to set this length to 50 just in case, because, maximum 50 characters. I don't think I'm going to need that, but it doesn't hurt to have the extra space. So, okay. Now if I hover my mouse right over the edge here, I can go ahead and make that small. Put that off to the right. And now, as I click on each one of these, you see how it highlights that? That's going to allow me to see which one I'm working with. Now, the softwood is going to be much darker green. And I've got a color infrared image going on here, so it stands out a bit more. But you can see softwood, hardwood. I'm not going to ding you hard if you mix up a couple of these. It's not a big deal. But I want you to take your best crack at it. And here, definitely hardwood up on the hill here, definitely softwood in here. So softwood tends to be in the wetter areas or on top of the hills, because softwood tends to dominate where there's not a very great depth to the rooting, where hardwoods are going to be more dominant where there's more space for the roots. So we would have mixed wood here. So you see there's some conifer mixed in here. Sort of pure hardwood here, pure conifer here, pure conifer here, pure hardwood here. So this is kind of a misbehaving stand because it keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. A true mixed wood is usually actually conifers mixed in somewhat evenly with the hardwoods. But most of this is hardwood. There's some softwood. But I'm going to have to go through each one of these and say what each one is. That's what makes the first part of this code. So softwood, mixed wood, hardwood. So let's go ahead back to our attribute table here. And I can't see through all of that, so I have to sort of go back and forth. But I'm going to type in S for softwood. It doesn't make sense to really spell it all out because, well, sometimes you misspell things, and that makes it very difficult to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. And now I have to get back to my table here. So 1, that's going to be a hardwood. H. That next one, also hardwood, H. And now I'm sort of going off the edge here. So I can right click, not there, but right click here, and zoom to feature. Now I can go back and forth here and say, oh, well, that's the one I was calling a mixed wood. It's sort of a patchy mixed wood, but it's a mixed wood. M for mixed wood. Number 5. Let's see, that looks like hardwood, that's an H. And let's see, right click here, zoom to feature, back and forth, that is definitely hardwood. So now we can go to number 7, flip back and forth here, can't really see it, so zoom to feature. We have some hardwood here, we have some softwood here, hardwood again here. I'm going to have to call that mixed wood. The actual inventory itself can modify that. So then I Let's see, right click, zoom to feature. So I can change these codes if I disagree with them after actually seeing the stand. So hardwood. Let's see that one. Let's zoom to it. Zoom to feature. Clear there. Definitely hardwood. Hardwood. Zoom to it. Back and forth. Definitely hardwood. And so on and so forth until you're done with all your stands. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with that. So I'm going to just toggle the editing for now, turn that off. Save that. And now I'm going to right click, zoom to layer. And you see I've sort of worked my way all the way down from this corner to that one. And now I can go in here and under Symbology, instead of a single symbol, I can change that to categorized. And I can use the value I just created, which is composition, and then hit classify to show my options. Now, every one of these has its own symbol type, and I can double click on each one, go to simple fill, and instead of no brush, let's go diagonal in that direction and make the fill color also our same yellow. Okay, apply. So now all the hardwood go that way. Let's take the mixed wood, simple fill, our brush. Let's go ahead and make that diagonal X and also our same yellow. And now for the softwood, so the hardwood's going this way, I'm going to put the softwood going the other way. So we have diagonal going that way, and I'm going to make that our same yellow, and okay. So now you can see the hardwood's going this way, the softwood's going this way, and the mixed wood is a checkerboard of both. See, I still have this feature selected. If I hit this button here, deselect features, now I can see it. So now if I go back to my editing, right click, toggle editing, right click, open attribute table, move that off to the side. Now let's take a look here. What am I dealing with next? So right there, that one, hardwood. Hardwood gets an H. And now you see how it's taken that code on. Very good. So that one, hardwood. This one, also hardwood. See, these all look like hardwood, but that doesn't mean they're all the same. Right click, zoom to feature, zoom out a little bit so I can see it. That one, oh, I feel like I'm seeing some of both in there, so I'm going to call that a mixed wood. So that one gets an M for mixed wood. And see how as we go along here, we're building out this coding for this entire system. Now let's say I don't want to keep clicking back and forth on that. That's a pain. I can go under Project, Properties, and there, under General, I can go to my selection color, and I can set that to be almost completely transparent. Let's apply that and see how it looks. That's maybe a bit too much. Let's try there, apply. That looks pretty good, and I can still see which one's selected because it's got those X's or crosses at the edge of there. So I can see what's what, and let's just make that a touch more see-through. Okay, so now I can see which one's selected. I can zoom to it, and I can see through it, and then I can do my classification all at once without going back and forth. Let's go ahead and try that. Got my attribute table open twice there. So that one's there. That one's H for hardwood. Now, which one's this? Zoom to feature. That one, oof, I'm seeing, I think, a lot of softwood in there, but also some hardwood. I'm going to have to call that mixed, and I'm going to figure out what the actual composition is on the ground now. And from there, I can make an adjustment to that call later on. So none of this is permanent. This is just sort of guiding where I'm going to look. Now I'm going to zoom to feature. That one's easily hardwood. So that. So I want to take that null text and include it. Don't want that. Let's see. Right click, zoom to feature. Definitely hardwood. None of that dark green. So now I need to go to that, zoom to feature, definitely hardwood. This is mostly a hardwood area, but of course these are all different ages, different conditions, so they can't all be lumped together. Right click, zoom to feature, more hardwood. It's definitely not a problem. We like having sugar maple. I would definitely not turn my nose up at this if it was for sale, but of course not. Zoom to feature. Ooh, interesting. That's a tricky one. There's probably going to be conifer in there, so I'm going to call that mixed wood for now, and then the inventory is going to answer that question for me, so M there. Now I'm going to add 2 more columns, and we're going to get all 3 of those categories, so whether it's hardwood, mixed wood, or softwood, and then you're going to estimate a size class, accepting that it's not going to be perfect. This is something you're going to refine on the ground. And then estimate a stocking, and I'll teach you how to do that soon. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to create 2 new fields. One of those is going to be called, let's see, what do I call that? Size. That's got to be text as well. I'm just going to let that be 10, that's fine. Using single letter codes anyway. And then 1 more, and that name is going to be stocking. And that, again, is going to be text. Okay, so now I have all of those. I can right click, zoom to feature, and see I've already called this one a hardwood stand, and that's its boundary there. Let's go ahead and classify that. And again, don't agonize over getting this perfect. This is something you will refine on the ground. So this is hardwood. We've already called that, and we can see all these harvesting trails here. We see a lot of open space, but only within the trails. This, in between the trails, that'll grow out. I'm going to call that a B level stocking. So again, your options are A, B, and C, where A is overstocked, where you don't see much of any room for any of these canopies to expand. B is well stocked, meaning there's growing space to be utilized, meaning trees can grow into it, but it's not so dense that they're really competing strongly and competing to death. So again, perfection is not the goal here. So we have this hardwood stand here, and the attribute table ran away, but there it is. So there's that, and you see how that hash mark goes away when that's selected. That's kind of handy. So size class, I'm going to call that, let's refer back to our guide here. So this is hardwood. I'm going to call that size class 3, saw timber. Looks like big canopies. Again, perfection is not the goal. But bigger trees, bigger trunks. Mid-size, mid-size. Small, small. So let's go ahead with that. So it's a size class 3 stocking B, H3B. Number 2, right click, zoom to layer, H. I'm seeing some lines here that was probably maybe operated once upon a time. It's looking like big canopies. I'm going to call that size or stocking A. And again, ground inventory rules. You can go out there, look at this, and say, oh no, these trees are doing great. They've still got room to grow for another 5 or 10 years. Bump that from an A to a B. The air photo interpretation, not the final word. Right click, zoom to feature. There's no reason you can't do this all at once. Call it the composition, size, and the stocking all at once. So here we have 3A as well. Here's another one, right click, zoom to feature, another 3A. So you see what I'm looking at, big canopies here, not much space between them to grow. There is some open space there. I'm not sure if that's from management. I'm sure there was somebody in here once upon a time, but I'm not sure if that's from recent management. Not sure if it's deliberate or if it's just trees dying, because that happens. So now number 5, right click, zoom to feature, there it is. I'm calling that another H3A. Let's go see another one, zoom to feature, H3B. See, there's big canopies, there's trails. Somebody's been in here and done some management. I'm guessing this is going to be a single tree selection system or something like it, because I don't see enough openings to really get a huge amount of regeneration going everywhere. So that's probably what's going on there, but of course you can tell on the ground. Right click, zoom to feature, H3A. Right click, zoom to feature, H3. See, I'm seeing more trails here. That's borderline. I'm going to call it a B. Right click, zoom to feature. See, much smaller canopies here. So this is bigger canopies out here, smaller canopies in here. I'm going to call that pole size. Pole size is 2. H3 or H2A. So that could do with the thinning. Right click, zoom to feature. There it is. Oh, I'm seeing some trails in there. They're not brand new, but I'm going to call that an H3B on the assumption that still has some growing space. After most operations like that, you get 20, 30 years before the growth rate really starts to crash again. You get longer if you go heavier, you get less time if you go lighter. So that's the whole balance of it. Right click, zoom to feature. Oh, those are tiny. Are those seedlings or those saplings? Gonna have to tell on the ground, but I'm going to call that a 1, and again that looks pretty dense in there at A. Right click, zoom to feature. That's definitely been recently worked. I'm calling that saw timber B. Right click, zoom to feature. Ooh, tricky one. So I'm seeing gaps in there. So you see those shadows, that's looking like there's some gaps in there. Definitely mature. I'm going to call that a B. And again, I've said this a bunch of times, this is the basis for a ground inventory. It is not the inventory itself. So 3B. I'm going to keep on going here until I get you into some that aren't typical. That's tricky. I should have split that one, really. See, I think I was thinking riparian zone here or something. Or maybe they did that since the air photo was taken. Let's check on that, actually. So here's that. Where are we? Oh yeah, so I didn't mess that up. They just messed it up for me. So, now there's nothing wrong with that, but that part looks like shelterwood, so that would be an H3C for less than fully stocked. That cohort is not going to fill in all that space. The new seedlings are. This one looks like it's done different. So they might have been in there, they might have done single tree selection, or they might have left it alone. In any case, I would need to split that out if I was actually doing this, but for right now, let's go ahead and just say that's the dominant part of that area. And we'll call that an H3C. All something different. Right click, zoom to feature. Likewise, we have a little inclusion of something else going on in here, but it's mostly this, so I'm going to call that H2A. Because most of that looks like smaller canopies, very densely packed. We have some inclusions of larger stuff here, so those boundaries could be refined. So here's a different one. This one is mixed wood, I think, leaning conifer. But you see all the open space here. This is definitely not fully stocked. This is going to be in a regenerating condition. So I'm going to call that H3C, not H3, M3C there. So here's what I'm calling M2C. So mixed wood, smaller crowns compared to the bigger crowns over here. Let's uncheck that so you can see. See much bigger crowns here, smaller crowns here. Definitely smaller trees here than here. And popping back to the attribute table, I already called that mixed wood, but it does look to be very tightly packed in there, so could do with a thinning. And you've heard me say that a couple of dozen times now, could do with a thinning. That is the normal condition for forests in Maine. The climate is such that we usually end up with a ton of seedlings, and not all of those seedlings can survive to maturity, and the path from seedling to mature tree is very slow but violent competition, or thinning. Thinning provides the growing space to the trees with the best form, but the species you prefer, so you might prefer red spruce over balsam fir for historical reasons or ecological reasons, or practical forest management reasons because spruce timber dries out a lot faster than fir timber. So the sawmill prefers it. Spruce also lives a lot longer than fir and has much higher rot resistance than fir. So a spruce can become a much bigger, taller, longer-lived tree. The joke that's only kind of a joke is when's the right time to cut a balsam fir? When you see one. But some dense little thickets can make very nice thermal cover for deer or birds. So it's not truly an evil species, but we have a lot more of it than we used to have. If you've been through my first Intro to Forestry lectures, the first 3 or 4 lectures, we started cutting the big pine, then the big spruce, leaving the fir. The fir became more dominant, and then through the spruce bodrum outbreak, all sorts of interesting things happened. Carrying on, I'm calling this a mixed wood because this is this huge reserve area that has a little bit of everything, and we're going to call that 3C. It looks like we have some pine scattered in here. Those all look like super canopy pine, very nice. And whether that really deserves to be a reserve area, might not be bad, or it's just the beneficiary of the end of my Zoom call. There you go, that's what that is. So we're getting along here, and I'll just pick this up when we get to the end. Now I do have this feature, which is water, and I can just go ahead and delete that. Bye-bye. It looks like nothing's changed because that shares the boundary with this polygon and that one, but if I use my Identify Features tool, you'll see there's nothing there, where there's something there, and something there, and something there too. This one is kind of tricky. I'm calling this an H2A. So you see how these crowns are smaller than these ones. It's noticeable by point of contrast. There's definitely smaller ones here and smaller ones here. Nice white pine up above the canopy here. These are mid-size. These could be bigger, they could be smaller. I'm calling it a size class 2, but that's one that we're probably going to have to tweak on the ground and actually measure the diameters of these trees. Now this opening I'm calling softwood, and I see so few trees here that I'm no longer considering these trees to be the ones making up the dominant cohort. I'm calling this regeneration. So I'm calling this softwood, size class 1 for seedlings, and stocking class B because I'm assuming that it's well stocked. That assumption may or may not prove to be valid. It could be overstocked, could be understocked. That's what a regeneration survey is for. So there we go. We have softwood, mixed wood, hardwood, with some need to update and check on those. So this has something I have as softwood pole size and stocking class B. But we can see here there are areas that are much more open, some that really fit the B stocking, and some that are still completely closed here in the riparian buffer. So that would have to be sort of broken down into smaller stands for future reference. The next thing we need to do to make this really useful is add area to our attribute table. So right click, open attribute table, and well, I guess we can make that big. And this button here is Open Field Calculator. So what we're doing here, number 1, we're creating a new field. Number 2, we're giving it a field name. That name is going to be acres. The output field type, number 3, has got to be a real number, decimal number. And the way we're going to do this is $ lowercase area times, using the asterisk symbol, paste in a conversion factor from square meters to acres, which is 0.000247,105, and I suggest you Google square meters to acres and copy that conversion factor. So that $area is calling for the computer to give the area of the polygon in the units of the coordinate system, which is square meters. Then we have to convert from square meters to acres. Okay, there they are. So now I can look at stand number 1, right click, zoom to feature that stand, hardwood, saw log size class, stocking class B, 65 acres. Now we're done editing, so I'm going to right click and save layer edits, and then right click toggle editing. I'm going to deselect the feature here. Now I'm going to show you one of the most important things that you can do in GIS, and that is an attribute query, which means a search for attributes with a certain characteristic, such as hardwood stands. You're going to do this again and again and again through FOR 242, GIS 300, and anything you do in the future with GIS. Right click, open attribute table. I'm going to move my attribute table into here, and see I have all of these. I can select all the A's, I can select all the 2's, I can select all the H's. I can select all the H's that are also C's. Any one of these things I can select, and then I can ask, how many acres is all of that? From here, I'm going to go to select features using an expression. And I have to start typing in the field that I want. So I want to look for all my hardwood stands, compositio. So start typing in composition and see how it suggests that there. I double click on that, it finishes for me. Then space, then equals, space again, single quotes, H, close single quotes, select features. Going to move that out of the way and move that out of the way. And you see it has selected all of the hardwood stands. So all of those are now selected. Let's see what happens if I clear that selection. There it is. So that's the clear selection button. And if I use the same equation again, give me all of the hardwood stands. Now I want to know the area of this whole polygon, and then I want to know the area of the hardwood stands within that polygon. Basically, what percentage of my property is hardwood. This purple button here is the one you want to use, and that opens up the statistics window. That window here, it's pointing at Main Township 24 to shorelines right now. We have to change that. So that's going to go to the Thompson Stands polygons, and now I have to tell it which one of these to look at, and I want to know the acres. There you go. So the sum of the whole area is 4,722.94 acres. If I check this box for selected features only, then the area of the selected features is 2,295.86 acres. So the area of the selected features, which is hardwood, divided by the total area of the entire property, move that decimal place over to 48.6% hardwood. Now I can just go back here and change that from H to S for softwood. Select features. Now the different ones are selected. Check selected features only. I have 623 acres of softwood. 623 acres of softwood divided by a total area of 4,723 acres gives 13% softwood. And the rest should be M mixed wood. And now selected features only, 1,803.66. 1,803 divided by 4,723 makes 38%. So 38% plus 13% plus 48% comes out to 99 and some rounding error. And we can also use the other attributes in the attribute table. So let's go ahead and look at our attribute table again. So we have composition, size, and stocking. Let's see how we're doing for size classes. So we can write size equals 3. And that, because it's text, has got to live inside of those single quotations. Select features. And now we have all of the size class 3 selected, 2s and 1s not selected. We can close that. And we see that's where all of those are. Total area here, 3,258.71. 3,258.71 divided by 4,723 equals 68.99, 69% in the size class 3. Of course, that depends on whether we call this a size class 3 because the dominant trees are of saw log size, or if this is a shelter wood, and at what point does it become an area that belongs to the new cohort. We can account for that mathematically. Let's say that we want composition equals H and size class equals 3. Select features. So what that's going to do is it's going to give us only those features that are hardwood and size class 3. H2 no longer applies. So now we have 1,828 acres of hardwood size class 3. 1828 divided by 4,723 equals 38% hardwood in the saw log size class. We can use one more AND statement and say stocking, double click to get that in there, equals B. Select features. So now we have 1,220 acres of hardwood, saw log size, well stocked without being overstocked or understocked. And what percentage of that is the total? So 1220 divided by 4723, 25%. Or strictly speaking, rounding to 26%. So these AND statements are used to sort of refine a query or refine a search, meaning make it more specific. An OR statement is sort of the opposite of that. So if we throw OR in there, that's going to select just about everything because it's asking if this is H, okay, good. Or if it's size class 3, whether it's H or not, that's good. Or if it's stocking B, regardless of whether these other things are true, still good. So select features, just about everything meets one of those criteria. So it's saying this criterion or that criterion or that criterion. If it's any one of those three things, then it gets selected, which is all but just a few mixed wood categories here. So those ANDs and ORs are tremendously important in querying and in legal contracts and in all sorts of other places. So switch that back to and, that makes it more specific. ORs make the search broader. Select features. Now we have only those stands that are well-stocked mature hardwood. Now say we want to look for mature hardwood that is perhaps overstocked. And of course these are air photo interpretations, you would check this on the ground. But again, we would say composition, double click, equals open quotes H, single open quotes, and size equals single quotes 3, single quotes, and stocking equals single quotes A. And now, selecting those features, 438 acres of that mature hardwood that may be in an overstocked condition, may deserve some attention. The question you might ask yourself on the ground, is this a late successional forest, or perhaps even an old-growth forest that ought to be allowed to develop naturally, or with a very light touch? If it's late successional, old-growth is usually hands-off. Or is it a developing, even-aged 10 to 12 inch stand that can be really improved into the next 30 to 50 years. That improvement could mean removing diseased stock, removing twisted trees, leaving trees that have nice big cavities for wildlife, but removing those trees that are not really worth the growing space. And giving the growing space to the longest lived, best quality species. So a nice straight sugar maple would win over a crooked sugar maple that didn't have any particularly good wildlife characteristics. And sugar maple would win over red maple. Sugar maple being the longer lived species with a harder wood and typically more value. So now it's time to make the map. Under Project, New Print Layout. We'll call this Stand Type Map Thompson. Enter. Okay. Now we need to fill up this big blank space, and we do that by selecting Add Map, and if we hover over the top left corner, see how it snaps there? Click, hold, drag, release the key. Rendering map, there it is. And to center that, we can use this Move Item Content button. Move that around until we're happy with where it is. And the space of this is very nice. I have room for legend and title and all sorts of good things in the corner. And I want to zoom in on this just as much as I can because I want the map content, the real detail of what I'm trying to show, to fill the page. Everything else goes around it. And now, you noticed on the demo map here that we've got a margin around here. That is sort of a stylistic choice. And part of it comes from whether we're going to include this map in a printed document, meaning an image that I bring into Word, versus something I'm going to print out on its own. So if you're going to print it out on its own, or if you're making an Avenza map, no margin at all, because when you plop that into Word, the Word document itself has another margin, so they end up with all margin and no map. Today, since we're more or less replicating this, let's go ahead and actually change what we did. And instead of going all the way out there, we can, let's see, we've got to select this tool and work with this tool. Then we can drag on those corners. And we can give that just a little bit more space there. And that gives us room for a lot of our extra information there. And I don't want to cut off anything there, so I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to move that around a little bit so we can see there. So now title can go here, and we have all sorts of space for our legend here. And we've not actually had to zoom out at all. So first let's give this a title. So that's going to be text here. Click, hold, drag a big box. The text for the title is always the biggest on the page. And it's going to be descriptive, saying Thompson Property Stand Map. And there we go. And that, of course, is too small. So if we click on font here, we can make that a very large font. Okay, that's too big. Let's go ahead and dial that back. Try size 28. Thompson Property Stand Map. And let's make that a center alignment there. And then we can move that around as we see fit. Next up is the north arrow, and that's going to be another click, hold, drag, release, and the default looks junky. So let's go under arrows here, and we have two options for east and west magnetic declination. We have west, meaning that magnetic north is to the west of true north. So North Pole's this way, Polaris is this way. This should have a star indicating, of course, the North Star Polaris, and that, if we go down here, this fill color is what we have to change, and I'm going to just drag that from white to black, and that brings that in. So that, selecting the color, if that's over a different color background, the white stands out. Over a white background, white of course blends right in, so you have to change it to black. Now we need a legend, and that legend is this button here with the yellow, red, and blue dots. Another click, hold, drag, release a box. And see, we've got all these things in here that we don't need. They're not even turned on. So I can just check this button, only show items inside the linked map. And that brings it only to what's actually visible. By default, anything I put here will also show up here. But if I uncheck this auto update box, I can leave this as it actually is and then double click on that and change that to say hardwood. Back here, double click, mixed wood. Over here, double click, softwood. Back, property bounds, give it a space, as it should be. Thompson stands polygons, stand boundaries. There we go. To move this around, I can just click, hold, and drag, and if I want to get super fancy, I can go in here and say property bounds, and in parentheses, 4,723 acres. There we go. And here, I can go ahead and, on the hardwood, say that was 48% hardwood. Back here, mixed wood. Mixed wood was 38%. And here, softwood, 13% softwood. So this is showing the total area of the property and the percentage of each composition type. Next, we want a locator map that's going to show where this map is in the context of the rest of the world, or at least the rest of the state. Before we do that, we have got to lock the layers and lock the styles for the layers, so that as we do the next step, this doesn't get thrown away and wasted. Now, we need to go ahead and add another map. So add map, click, hold, drag, release. This is going to be the little one. And this, we can change the scale. So if we throw a 0 on the end of that scale, we zoom out. If we take 2 digits away, we zoom in. So let's try a 100,000 scale. Let's see, that'll be a 1 to 1 million scale. So 1 inch on the ground is 1 million inches on, or 1 inch on the map is 1 million inches on the ground. Now I need to add another map, and that's going to be our locator map. So click, hold, drag, release a box, and see this map properties under the main properties here. The scale, the bigger this number is, the more we're going to zoom out. Throw a 0 on the end of that, we're zoomed all the way out there. Take 2 digits away, we're zoomed way in. Let's try a 1 to 1 million. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros, 1 to a million scale. We'll start with that. Now we have to go back to our map here and I'm going to uncheck both of those. I'm going to check on my main townships to shorelines, and I'm actually going to change that from being sort of a dotted line to a solid line so we can see those better. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this from transparent to a heavy black. There we go, and I'm going to say transparent stroke. So now see how that stands out. Now I'm showing town lines and the actual area of my property here. So now I'm going to go back to my stand type map, click on map number 2, and let's try the update map preview. There it is. So you see how that matched that to that. And I can use my move map elements around tool to show here. And now we have the town of Allagash, and all the way over here the corner of the town of Fort Kent. Because I have space here, I can expand this box, that way I can see Fort Kent, and that's going to be there. So see how that's changing the scale? I don't want that. So I want 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros, 1 to 1,000,000. And now I can move that stuff around. So see there's Quebec, there's Fort Kent, there's Allagash, there's our property. I want labels on these, so I can right click, properties, and give me labels. My labels, single labels, are going to be town. And let's go ahead and go to the text, and let's just go ahead and say apply. Okay, that's where those are. Let's see how that looks on our actual map, which is living here. I'm going to refresh here. That's kind of a mess. Back to the drawing board, and this is really tricky when you're working on the scale that we are. So let's try moving that all the way down there. Okay, those are getting tiny, but it might work out. Let's see. So that's there, all of those are in there. We might actually be able to get away with a size 3. So let's try that there. On the locator map, there's not much else to see besides that, so the label is sort of the main topic of that. So let's refresh that. Ooh, we're getting a little shady there, but with most of these are looking just fine. So let's keep that. Now let's go ahead and lock the layers and lock the styles. That way, if I go and change something here, as I'd like to do, get back to the way it was here, I don't have to lose this. This is now sort of permanently locked in. I can go off here, and there's some things I need to change on that. Like I need to give that a border around the edge, which I can do. Ooh, that got all kinds of messed up. So, see how I'm holding the scroll wheel? That's what's going on here. So I'm using the scroll wheel over that. Well, that's selected. Don't do that. So, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 to 1,000,000 scale. There's that. I have to move that around. So be careful with that. Let's see. So there's Fort Kent. There's that. You could include roads on here. That's debatable. There's different ways to get in here. You could include the route. You don't have to. Now I'm going to go ahead and lock that in there. That is what it is and how it is. I can't do anything with that. I can't. Let's see if it does anything. Oh, it will let me do that, so don't do that. But it's no longer allowing me to just use the scroll wheel and mess that up, so watch out for that. So anyway, what I was trying to do was get down to here, and I'm going to go ahead and give that a frame. So check on the box for frame, and I can click off there. No, that looks pretty good to me. If I care to, with this frame here, not on map number 1, map number 2, with this frame I can change the color, the thickness, anything I want. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to go ahead and check that lock button. I can no longer mess that up with my scroll wheel, and that I'm going to call done. So my layers are locked, that's where it is, and there's nothing else to be done with that. So now I'm back to map number 1, and I can go ahead and check my stands back on, put the symbology back the way it was, simple fill. Opacity, yes. Color, yes. Okay, and I can check my ortho image back on and my town boundaries off. Next up on map number 1, I want a grid, and that's going to show the UTM coordinates around the entire edge of the map, just like that soils map did before. So under grids, I'm going to say the big green plus for a new grid. And now I'm going to go ahead and modify that grid. And the grid type is solid. The CRS is map CRS, which is UTM zone 19 north. And the interval, 1000 by 1000, is sort of a conventional grid for the UTM, a 1 by 1 kilometer grid. Of course, that stands out way too much there. So let's go ahead and change the line style. And that simple line, so I can click on that and change whatever I want. So that can be a hash line. Ooh, that's too much. That can be a marker line. Again, too much. Oh, let's see. Simple line. And instead of a solid line, I can make a dashed line or dotted line. That's looking better. Now we're not done yet, but this is sort of a preview map. I can sort of see what's going on, but I really want to see what the finished product is going to look like, especially with this grid here. So I'm going to go Layout, Export as PDF. And you're going to get an error if you don't have the coordinate system set for there. So if it doesn't say EPSG 26919 there, you're going to have a problem. But let's go ahead and save that. Might as well be a geospatial PDF, save, and let's see what comes out the other end there. Think, very good. Open that up, and an error exists on that page, may not destroy it correctly, that's fine for now. So, our border around that went away, that's not the best, that might have been the error, but our grid actually looks pretty good. So we like the grid, but we also need the labels. So let's go ahead and modify that grid again. And we have to scroll down here all the way down to draw coordinates. Of course, the coordinates are in UTMs, which don't have, or ought not to have decimals there. So we do have to scroll all the way down here and change this coordinate precision down to 0, which makes that just plain numbers with no decimals. And that's, of course, the units are in meters. If we want to be good and proper fancy, we can take this decimal and say decimal with suffix. So we have the northing and the easting. This is getting right up on the edge here, so we can do two things with that. And one of those, the font for all of these is a bit big. We can change that down to size 8, and that'll do just fine. And we can also adjust map number 1 here and use our tool here to make that just a bit smaller, because that doesn't need to be as big as it is, and we don't have any manually generated labels to be moved around. So now that's looking a little bit more even on each side, and nothing of any real value has been lost. But what has changed is that map number 2. Now that lives over there, and we need to make sure we're using the right tool, which will move things. And move that so it stays in alignment with that edge, because it looks messy if it's hanging off the edge there. Now we can lock that back in place. Likewise, north arrow wants to be a bit farther down to be aligned with other things, and we need some text here saying what that magnetic declination is. So let's go ahead and add that text. So click, hold, and drag there. Lorem ipsum is just a placeholder text to show you what it's going to look like. Declination minus 16 degrees west. And just to be nice and crisp with that, centered declination there, center that up, and there you go. Now I'm looking at the stand type map and I'm seeing that I can only just barely make out the direction of these hash lines here. And that's okay, because what I'm going to do next is label these, so I can just barely see what's going on here. But the label is going to make everything clear, because the labels include the stand type as well as the composition and the size class. And now for the labels. I have to right click, go into properties, and under labels here, so symbology here, labels here, I have to go into the expression builder here, the expression dialog, and see how that format is. So quote whatever the name of the field is, end quote. To use three different fields together, there's a pretty easy trick here. So it's going to be quote first, compositio, just like writing a query, close quotes. And then on my keyboard it's just under the backspace, but it's the same key as the backslash, but it's a vertical line. Hold down my shift key, two of those. So two vertical lines in between each field name. And again, it's got to be quotes, and then size, quote, and then two vertical lines, stocking, quote. And that, when I hit OK and apply, is going to give me H3A. So hardwood, saw log size, well stocked. Or overstocked, as the case may be. B is well stocked. And of course, too big to fit in a lot of those, so let's go ahead and make those smaller. And we'll see how that looks in the actual map itself. So let's go to our map, stand type map, there we go. And we don't see it yet because we've locked our layers. So we've got to go into our map number 1, and down to here, where do we leave that? Lock layers. Uncheck that, and those load in. Now let's go ahead and export that. See how it looks. Export as PDF. Save, replace the old version. And I've had to uncheck all these, and I've unchecked this too for right now. I had some issues with drawing. So if you have an issue where you export and you don't see some features on your map, try just unchecking all three of these. Save. Once that loads up, we'll take a look and see how our labels are doing. There they are, very good. And there's that. So we have every one of those labels fitting in where it belongs. Some overlap, and that's unfortunate. Let's see what we can do to correct that. Close, back to our map, back in here, and let's go ahead and give that a little bit of a buffer. Draw a buffer on the text. And make the opacity, I think 70-ish% was working well enough before. Let's make that color black instead of white. See how that does. H3B, oh, that stands out much better, like Bumblebee. Okay, so now if we go back to our map here, and let's see, we just hit the refresh button and that loads in. Much better. Now we can save as a PDF, do the same thing again, overwrite the old version. Can't be open when you do that, it can't override the file, but it's still open. And then that's going to finish up. There it is. Stand type map version latest with our labels that stand right out above everything else. Outstanding. So now we need some more labels to show. One, this is the stand we're working with. All of these labels are fine, but we need to show that this connects to that. And then we need some text here explaining what all of these mean. So I'm going to close that, go back to here, and go back to my map. And now I'm going to add text. So that, space for a text box there. And let's go ahead and just make those match in height, and we can start adding our text here. So I'm going to use the same format as the demo here, so species composition, and that was H, hardwood, M, mixed wood, S, softwood, and then size class was 1, seedling sapling, 0.1, space to 4.0 inches, 2 was whole timber, 4.1, space to 10.0 inches, and then 3 space saw timber, which was greater than 10 inches dBH. And finally, we had the stocking, which was A, overstocked. Let's see, I missed my space in there. B, space, well stocked. And C was understocked. And let's go ahead and remove those. See how we're doing here. And that font size is just a touch too big for all that to fit. So there's that, and let's see, I've got an extra capital there. Got to be good on all that. And that is looking pretty good. Now I can go ahead and make that box fit, and I'm just going to move that box right over there. And let's see, next I need a line here. Property bounds. And we'll go ahead and make that fit. So you see how it's made that text weird. It has to be big enough there. And that's going to do better on 2 lines there. I'm going to remove that space. And then I'm going to make center alignment there. And that needs to be a bit bigger there. So now that is clearly labeled. We know where Fort Kent is. We know where Allagash is. And now we just need a little bit of extra information down here about who made it and some other details. And finally, the scale bar. This button here, click, hold, drag, release. Default units in meters, which is the default for the coordinate system. Selecting our scale bar, we can change the units from meters to, let's try feet. And if not feet, let's try miles. Since this doesn't stand out very well with the background there, let's go ahead and add a background, white background. And with almost everything in QGIS, we can make that background color partly transparent by going into here and changing the opacity as we see fit. Makes it stand out a little bit less. And if you so choose, you can change the number of segments, which makes it longer. And you can change how long each segment is by changing this number here. 0.25 will change this to 1/4 mile per segment. And then you can increase here. But for the most part, I find the defaults are pretty good in this software. So go ahead and make sure it stands out with a nice background if you need to, or you can place it somewhere you have space on the white part of the page. Those details being your name, so created by Neil Thompson, or you can just say by Neil Thompson, make it all fit, and QGIS 3.16, and today's date, which is February 19th, is it? Yeah, it's the 19th. 2021, that's not okay, but that's where we are. And the NAIP imagery 2018, UTM zone 19 north. For class use only. That for class use only, sometimes, or you very often see, not for use in a property sale, or something else, for demonstration purposes only, for reference only, not to be used in place of a legal survey. Does not represent the property boundaries to that degree of precision. Cannot misrepresent that. So let's go ahead and just make sure that's sort of squared up there. So by Neil Thompson, QGIS 3.16, February 19th, 2021, NAIP imagery 2018, UTM zone 19 north for class use only. We have magnetic declination. We have the codes for our stands, the percentage of which each one is, this legend. That got away from me. Thompson or stand boundaries. I did change that before, but I misclicked and that went away. So now we have stand boundaries, hardwood, mixed wood, softwood, their percent of this total area, species composition. You can make 2 text boxes and put them side by side if you want that to be sort of blended in there, but we could fit it all right here the way we've got this one laid out. And your layout should be different based on whether it's a taller than it is wide or wider than it is tall. You need to change from this landscape view to a portrait view, which is the up and down way. Page properties, and we can change the orientation here. I'm not going to because that would ruin everything. So back, back, back. But this is looking pretty good to see at least how it comes out. So let's go ahead, export as PDF. Save is the same thing, replace the old one, we don't need all those drafts. Save. Think. Stand type. There it is, and that is looking pretty sharp. So we've gone from having nothing at all, just drawing lines on Google Earth, into this stand type map that is ready to go. You could use this to communicate with the landowner. You could use this to do your next steps in forest inventory. We're going to get into that part next week. So this is enough for this week. So what you have is stand types. They're roughed out. Your inventory is going to tell you what those really are. And we'll get into laying out the plots for that next week. I think we can stop here and say we've got the property bounds, we've got the township labels, we've got the locator map, we've got the key to the labels. The labels look sharp. They have a nice boundary around them that makes them stand out. They fit within there. Not too many overlaps. Some of those are unavoidable. But that is looking pretty sharp. So your output will be used with the stand type map that you made in Google Earth last week. And your output is going to look something just about like this. So there you go, from nothing all the way to a stand type map that you could show to a landowner or anyone else. And that, if you're a future forester, is something you'll do day in, day out. If you're a private consulting forester, the workflow will be somewhat similar, somewhat different if you're an industrial forester or working for the Forest Service or Bureau of Parks and Lands. Slightly different perspective there, but you're still drawing stand boundaries, you're still getting stand types, you're still doing real inventory on the ground. Well done getting this far. This is where you're starting to see things that you would really do in real life that have real practical value.